I was planning to make Eisbein, but to accompany it, I realized I gotta make some sauerkraut first. So I bought 1.5 kilograms of organic red cabbage. It arrived as a pair, so I decided to create 2 different batches. One for sauerkraut with a dry salting fermentation, and the other for simple brine fermentation. I rinsed the cabbage under tap water, and I'm using paper towels to pat them dry. If the outer leaves are wilted or not fresh, remove them. These 2 look pretty good. Before getting down to the business, I had to make sure jars are good for fermentation. Now, jar sanitization can be a separate episode, but I'll just show you a common method here for demonstration purposes. In a large pot or canner, submerge the jars in room temperature water, then cover them with a lid. Bring the water to a boil and continue boiling for at least 10 minutes. Then carefully take the jars out to let them cool down. The preparation of brine fermentation takes no time at all, so I'll begin with that version. I typically cut off the end of the core and discard it, as this is the part that tends to get mold or look less fresh. Then I cut a cabbage in half and carefully remove the core by making 2 diagonal cuts. Set the core aside. Cut a cabbage into thin strips, or you can use a mandolin to shred it. Lastly, slice 2 cores into pieces. Now I make a simple brine for cabbage, and a salt percentage between 1.5 to 3% will work. Since my kitchen temperature ranges from 23 to 25 this season, I'm adding 2.2% salt water. In the summer, when my kitchen exceeds 30 degrees, I would use up to 3% salt. Place the strips into 2-liter jar and add a salt brine to the jar just till it's level with cabbage. Top it off with the core slices. If necessary, add a little bit more water to level them. Tear a piece of plastic wrap and fit it inside the jar, ensuring it touches solution. Then add the same salt brine to a Ziploc bag and put it back on top of plastic wrap. This will submerge cabbage beneath the solution, creating an anaerobic environment that lactic fermentation requires. Next up, I'll make some sauerkraut. And by the way, this is cabbage traditionally used for sauerkraut. Feel free to go classic, but hey, be creative. I'm using a smaller container this time, so I've quartered the cabbage and then cut it into thin strips. I don't want to waste a core, so I have the julienne. The amount of salt will be based on the actual weight of cabbage, so I use a scale to weigh the cabbage first, followed by the salt. I'm sticking with the same 2.2% salt as in previous brine version. I sprinkle salt over the cabbage and toss it to evenly distribute it. Now you have 2 choices. You can either leave it be and let time do most of the work for you, which could take hours, or you can use your hands to massage the shreds continuously for 15 to 20 minutes. I've opted for the latter. The salt will soon draw water out of the cabbage, and the vegetable will become softened. Keep massaging, but you can grab a handful and squeeze it into a ball without it falling apart. It's ready. Sauerkraut also requires an anaerobic environment. The difference with the brine fermentation is it ferments in its own juice rather than in a water solution, which is quite similar to kimchi. So firmly press cabbage into the jar. Squeeze out some of the juice before stacking if necessary. Towards the end, the pressed cabbage and its juice can cover the vegetable by at least 1 centimeter or about 1 inch. It's good to go. But if you don't have enough juice to cover it, you need to make a brine with the same salinity and add it to the jar. Use a clean paper towel to wipe the inside of the jar clean. The rest do the same as the previous one. Cover it with plastic wrap in contact with the mixture and top it with a Ziploc bag filled with the same saline water solution. I have plenty of juice left, so I just filled the bag with it. Mark the date. Join it with the brine version and place both in a safe spot in the kitchen. From now on, observe the changes daily. On day 2, which is 24 hours later, the brine version starts to bubble up, but the sauerkraut seems quiet. On day 3, the brine version bubbles even more, and the sauerkraut remains seemingly quiet. Another day passes and the same thing happens. But I'm not worried, as I know they're happily fermenting. Just because I can't see the bubbles doesn't mean there's no activity. Here is a tip. In the first few days, the containers are likely to release some of the brine, so put a bowl or tray underneath to avoid any mess. Tip number 2, avoid using cabbage juice in the Ziploc bag to weigh it down because it may start to develop mold after several days. If this happens, discard it and replace it with a bag filled with the same saline water solution as the sauerkraut. If the edge is plastic wrap against concerned you, go ahead and change it. Take this opportunity to inspect the fermentation, check for any mold and smell for any odors that may have developed. Mine seems to be in good shape, so I'll proceed with changing plastic wrap. Only, I noticed the next day that the bubbles in the brine jar are almost gone, and when days pass by, there's sediment at the bottom of the jar. But I'm not concerned. Lactic fermentation is safe when the pH drops below 4.6. You can use a pH meter to test it starting from the 3rd day. As for brine version, I usually ferment it for 4 to 30 days, depending on my kitchen temperature. This is day 11, and I've decided to stop fermentation. Always check for any mold growth, especially on surface mixture, and give it a good sniff. It should have acidic aroma with a typical fermentation note. The pH readings shows 3.15, well below the safe threshold 4.5. Use clean utensils to remove the cabbage, cover it with lid, and store in the refrigerator. Regarding sauerkraut, it doesn't have much juice left, so I didn't test it, but I'm confident it's healthy. Sauerkraut is typically recommended to ferment for at least 3 weeks to develop a complex flavor, but you can decide when to stop based on your preference. For the sake of this demonstration, and because I need it for Eisbein, I'll go ahead and use it. You can see the brine version has a dragon fruit-like color, while the sauerkraut has darker beetroot-like hue. At this stage, I find sauerkraut to be less sour than the brine version, and almost sweet, indicating it could be fermented longer, but it already tastes quite good. By the way, both are still crispy. I like the vibrant color of brine version, and the juice is also nutritious and versatile. You may drink it as is, add it to vegetable or fruit juice or shake. Use it in bread, add it to cooking rice for some color, and use it as a starter to kick off new fermentation. Just to use your imagination. Regarding sauerkraut, you may add it to salads, sandwiches, burgers, wrap, and more. Actually, both work well in the mentioned scenarios. But I must remind you of one of the traditional purposes of sauerkraut in German food, to accompany Eisbein, which I'll show you how to make next time. Bye for now. I will see you soon.